When it comes to character designs, there's a plethora of things to consider when creating your design, like the character's personality, the simplicity or complexity of your art style, any limitations of the medium you're working with, and whether or not the design makes sense in the story you've crafted, if your character is part of one. So many factors, I'll say, that trying to create a how-to on character design in general is pretty pointless if you'd ask me. And considering I by no means would describe myself as an expert on character design, I'm not even going to attempt to create one. Instead, I'll be zooming in on the broader topic this episode to take a closer look at one of my favorite aspects of character design: thematic characters. So, you rubies voted for me to cover character design as the next topic of Scribblarium, and I am happy to oblige. I'll be taking you through thematics and symbolism in character designs by going over some designs I've created for my novel series, which is admittedly a really good excuse to rant about my characters for a good while. Anyway, this video will contain some hints and detailing, but I'll refrain from giving any significant spoilers, so you should be good to watch this even if you haven't read a single chapter or just don't want to be spoiled on upcoming ones. Let's dive into it. A key element to the story I write is cycles, whether that be the moon cycle, cycles of life, or seasonal ones, and it was pivotal to set up that theme at the very beginning of the story. In the first chapter, you are introduced to the Frostthorn family, the Fae that have taken our protagonist Erin into their home. In the family, you have Anthea, Erin's older cousin, Astra, her aunt, Hazel, her younger cousin, and finally Juniper, her uncle, representing spring, summer, autumn, and winter, respectively. I wanted to carry that theme through in their design as a family, starting from the most basic elements of their design all the way through to the finer detailing. So, starting with the group design, I'll be discussing skin tones. The first element was pretty simple: darker skin tones for the warmer seasons, spring and summer, and lighter skin tones for the colder seasons, autumn and winter. But I wanted to differentiate even further, so I took the skin undertones. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, undertones is a term used both in painting and in the makeup industry. In the former, it is used to refer to the color beneath the main color. Many painters start with a color very different to the tone they want to end up with to give the end result a specific vibrancy or feeling. In the latter, it is used to determine the shade of foundation you need to best match your original skin tone. In this case, as I am painting skin, I'll be talking about both. For Astra and Juniper, it was relatively simple: a warm undertone for summer and a cool undertone for winter. But when I got to Anthea and Hazel, I wanted to continue the feeling of the passing of the seasons by giving Anthea a slightly cooler undertone under her darker skin, bringing her more to an olive. You know, because the best time to plant olives is in spring, and because... Greece? This will make sense, I promise. And Hazel a warmer undertone under her lighter skin. By doing so, I made Anthea and Hazel's skin colors bridge the warm and cool colors by means of undertones, just like spring and autumn are the bridges between summer and winter. I also gave Hazel freckles because they remind me of those clusters of leaves you see everywhere in autumn, at least where I live. I love those. Moving on, I followed a similar convention for their hair colors by associating their hair colors with something from their season. Anthea, representing spring, got a soft brown that lights up blonde when the light hits it right, like a tree in the spring sun. Astra, representing summer, got a deepened, dark brown with natural highlights, like the bark of a tree in the specific lighting you get from the harsher summer sun. Hazel, representing autumn, got a bright orange ranging from a light yellow to a dark and burnt orange, like the pumpkins and fallen leaves of fall. And Juniper, representing winter, got a deep red, like winterberries. And thus the main color palettes were set. So from here on out, I'll be discussing the characters individually, starting with Anthea. Now that I've talked about their skin tones and hair colors all following this seasonal theme, it might not come as a surprise that each one of the Frostthorn family members was named after an aspect of their season. Anthea was named after the Greek goddess Anthea, a goddess associated with springtime and flowers. She, Anthea, was the goddess of vegetation, gardens, blossoms, especially worshipped in spring and near lowlands and marshlands, favorable to the growth of vegetation. For her outfit, or rather outfits, I took inspiration from hippie culture, which comes with a fashion style heavily associated with springtime and flowers. Her main colors range from soft roses and violets to deep magentas and fuchsias. See what I did there? On the very first outfit she wears in chapter 1, you can also spot some strawberries. In terms of her own personal touches, I can definitely imagine her having stitched on the strawberries herself. The stitches in the middle of her dress were meant to invoke the same idea, giving it this handmade feel. You might notice in the other designs that this is a recurring theme, thus being an early setup for Anthea's future fashion we'll come to see in later chapters. Speaking of a recurring theme, each of the Froststorm family members also has a touch of green in their outfit, visually tying them back to Erin, whose signature color will end up becoming green. But before I digress too far, Anthea in particular carries this theme through in nearly every outfit she wears, giving you an early visual clue that her story is going to be linked to Erin's. Juniper was definitely the hardest to tie to his season while keeping to the theme of plants and flowers. I didn't want to make his design white or blue, like many winter designs tend to be, because I felt like that would get cold and unfamiliar rather fast. So I opted for giving him slightly darker colors based on the colors of the tree he was named after, the Juniper tree, symbolizing resilience and strength. Junipers produce pollen cones or flowers on male plants to pollinate female plants and produce seed. The major production of this pollen occurs in late winter. Because juniper trees are cone-shaped, I gave Juniper a poncho that, if you turn him upside down, is really just a cone. His design has two little pieces of rope running over it, one holding a pendant shaped like a leaf, in particular a hazel leaf, the other tying his skirt. The design not leaning too harshly into winter colors has the added benefit of being able to lean more into that for his council attire when I get to that. Astra's dresses and hairstyle were inspired by Spanish flamenco dresses, a dance style all about passionate emotions. But instead of the bright colors associated with flamenco dresses, I opted to give her the color palette of an Astra, the flower that gave her her name, with soft purples, greens and a hint of yellow. Asters are daisy-like flowers that bloom in late summer and early fall. Much like Juniper's pendant being a tie to Hazel, the flower in Astra's hair being a slightly pinkish/purplish color is a tie back to Anthea's signature colors, a fitting tie as Anthea's name means flower. I did decide to keep the hairstyle a bit more loose to tie back into a more ancient Greek style too, as the Council of Sylvia was, in part, inspired by the Council of Ancient Athens. This is also what inspired the folded over look of the top part of her dress, commonly seen in Old Greek fashion. Last but certainly not least, we've got Hazel. Her design holds the most narrative weight out of all of them, so I kept it for the end of the video. Hazel's name came directly from the hazel tree, a tree that, in mythology, harbors magical properties. It is preferable to plant your hazel in fall to promote root development before winter. Apart from the tree, her name has an association with the color brown. So as Hazel's theme is fall and her name means brown, the first thing you might notice is the suspicious lack of any autumnal colors, even if her hair and eye color both scream autumn. You might also notice that the color palette of her outfit in general seems to mimic the springtime aesthetics of Anthea's outfit, with a washed out version of the pinks, yellows and greens we find in Anthea's first design. When you invert all of the character designs to a grayscale, all of them have a very clear contrast between the different elements of their designs, but Hazel's has a very low contrast in comparison, which would definitely be there if she wore oranges and browns. The mimicking is a bit of a recurring element, as Hazel mimics the other three Froststorms introduced in the first chapter as well. Erin's pink top, beige shirt, green skirt is inverted to a green top, beige shirt and pink skirt. Juniper's little rope tying his skirt is matched with a similar lace on hers, same side as well, and just like Astra, she wears a flower in her hair as well as on the upper part of her design. I really wanted to provide early visual context for the fact that she is still very young and relying on copying elements from her parents, sister and cousin to establish who she is, thus setting the stage for future character development. As time passes and the story progresses, she too will ease deeper into her own aesthetics. So that wraps up the part of this video where I talk about my characters. What I'd like to do now is to take a look at someone else's work. As Scribblarium is meant to be a safe space for artists and writers to discuss various topics, I want to take some time each video to shout out an indie artist, writer or project. This time, I'm taking a look at someone whose character designs are simply captivating. Dan, also known as Poppyhin. You know what? Dan. The Ebony Witch. Dan's character Bonnie is such a wonderful example of a thematic character design done well. From the moment you lay your eyes on Bonnie, you can just tell she's a witch, even when she's not wearing her hat. Her dress and high heel combo, paired with a matching pair of gloves, gives off a sweet witchy vibe that is only enhanced by the otherworldly pattern on her forehead. The shape of her hair gives it a striking silhouette, making her instantly stand out among other characters. Speaking of the silhouette, Bonnie's animated design does a great job of adhering to an overall more muted and cohesive color palette and darker colors, while still making her overall design clearly readable through the gold lining on her skirt. Overall, a great character design for the star of this promising project. If you want to check out the Ebony Witch, Dan is currently working really hard on creating an animated film for the project, and has a whole bunch of preview videos up here on YouTube. I'll leave a link in the description. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the Ruby X Saga project, you now can. I've recently opened a Patreon page where, as a member, you get to take a look behind the scenes, with early access to unillustrated chapter parts and in-between updates on the progress of the designs and the illustrations. All for just €2 a month. And should you not be in the best of financial situations or simply do not want to commit long term, subscribing to a tier grants you access to all the behind the scenes stuff from previous months, so you can choose to support one time, have a look around and then unsubscribe before the next charging hits. Even just a single pledge helps make this project possible. That said, see you all soon for chapter 2 of the audiobook. It's promising to be another magical experience. Keep living the magic, CJ Frostthorn.